All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to Corporate Bytes. My name is Rich Bowers, and today we are tackling the topic of digital mindset. For our subject matter expert, I brought in Sierra White, who is the coaching manager who specializes in digital mindset creation and development with individuals. So, hey, Sierra, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm super excited to be here today.
Awesome. Well, we're happy to have you, and obviously with so many different technologies floating around, and the popular buzzwords of digital transformation and everything digital. I really am looking forward to discussing the impacts of that mindset that you really create in others. So, let's start off with the basics, right? Let's go with it. For those who may not be familiar or, obviously spend all day and night thinking about this, what is digital mindset? In a really brief overview, how would you explain digital mindset?
Yeah, so with digital mindset, this is definitely a phrase and term that became really popular late 90s, early 2000s when really all of that disruptive technology started coming out. And what digital mindset really means is it's a set of approaches that is going to deal with the digital age and all of these new technologies that keep coming out. So things such as how to be agile, how to adapt, how to be outcome oriented, these are all the main topics that stem around digital mindset and what I'll be kind of diving a little bit deeper into today of how exactly to be these things.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, when you're talking about the basically increase in technologies, it just seems like since the 90s, you had obviously the boom of technology going into Y2K, but and then you had cloud and everything else that's coming on. It's been critical for employees to be able to interact with these technologies, whereas before it maybe wasn't as important. So really interesting to see that it's kind of that combination of the way people interact and think, as you mentioned, with these type of technologies. So today, obviously, especially when we're talking about Gen AI and metaverse and everything else there, do you think it's more important or just going to continuously get more and more important to have this type of mindset in the landscape of today?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I don't think it's even going to be more important. I think it's going to be mandatory, where if you don't have a digital mindset, there's going to be really no way you can keep up to date with everything that's going on, especially in the last few years, like you mentioned with Gen AI. For example, there are so many people using ChatGPT to help them with anything really, with building content or helping generate their day better, or just finding out information. If you're working with someone who is using that and you're not, you're going to get left behind. So it's just something that is so important these days, especially with how quickly technology is evolving, maybe too quickly at this rate. And it's something that, it's really going to be something that people start realizing, okay, if I don't know how to use this, I'm going to get left behind. So I think it's just so crucial, especially now. And you really have to be able to adapt to it.
No, great points. And something that I wanted to bring up is you actually help coach all levels of individuals in an organization. And when you're talking about the landscape of today and it becoming mandatory, is this the mindset at least people know that they have to move in this direction that you're seeing, or are some people still blindsided by it?
Yeah, it's actually interesting because you would think with all of the news out there about generative AI and all of these new technologies, you would think people would assume that they have to have this mindset. And I more likely than not find that that's not the case, or people just think that they can still do the bare minimum and that will help them get by. And yes, if you want to, keep at the bare minimum forever, sure. But if you really want to grow in this field and grow in your career, it is something that is mandatory. So it's pretty interesting to see that not that many people do have that awareness yet. I do think, especially within the next 1 to 2 years, it will be something that people start to realize more and more once they see themselves getting left behind compared to others.
And how about for I guess the people who are entering the workforce right recently, right? You have that term digital native, and digital native basically meaning they were born with a computer, and they kind of understand the ins and outs. Do you see a difference in people coming right out of school as opposed to maybe those who've been in the industry, 10, 15 years, and not even just technical industry we're talking about here. We're talking about any industry, right? Do you see a difference in basically the welcoming of those technologies? Or is it more so almost like the digital natives in quotes here who are just coming into the industry say, well, hey, look, I know it. I don't need to learn anymore.
Yeah, I think that with these digital natives, with a lot of individuals who are brand new into their careers, they're expected for everything to just present its answer to themselves because that's how it is. They grew up with Google to ask all their questions to and to get everything answered. It's a little bit less problem solving mentality is what I've seen with this new kind of generation that's coming in. And I think that could potentially cause for this AI new evolution to be a little bit of a crutch instead of using it for learning. So that's something that I have also seen is it is a little bit different of a mindset. Instead of problem solving, I need to figure this out. It's more, how can this technology just give me an answer instead of more so just help me out? I think in those older generations, they worked without technology beforehand. So when technology came around, they saw it as a area that they could use help with, but not rely on 100%. So that's what I really think is a big difference there.
And that's a great observation. I just finished reading up the technology fallacy, and they have a lot of great surveys and data mentioned in that book, and they share actually the same point of view in that I think the misconception is that the people newer to the workforce are going to be those that are more welcoming to the changes in technologies, whereas through their surveys they've seen it's people who've been in the existing workforce, right, who've been around that says, hey, look, let me try to welcome these. Let me try these out and try to be more efficient. So really interesting perspective, Sierra. And we're going to talk about, maybe resistances that you encounter, but you bring up a really good topic. And when you're talking about digital mindset, I think I guess the fallacy is that it's so heavy on technology alone. And in your description of it in the beginning, you talked about approaches, right? I think you mentioned agility or so. So a popular question that I'm sure you get is how much technology knowledge is important for starting to grow your digital mindset?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question because I think it really depends on how you define technology. I think some people, when they think of technology, just think of maybe coding languages or being good at computer areas. But with technology, I think what is really important to start growing your digital mindset and how much you need to know beforehand, I think it's just really important to be up to date on what's happening. So, do you know what ChatGPT is, for example? That's definitely really important to know because those are technologies that are being utilized. So you necessarily don't have to come in and grow a digital mindset with being able to code a full application on your own. I think it's more so a mindset that you have to have for a digital mindset is just being open to learning new things, being open to adapt. I think that that is really more so of the main area that is necessary to grow a digital mindset.
Okay, great. Thank you for that response. There's also, I'm sure you've run into it, something that's called the 30% rule. And it was popular by, I believe, Paul Leonardi, who wrote The Digital Mindset. And it's a focus on, being able to know enough to be dangerous with the technologies, being able to collaborate or follow along with or ask questions for when they're speaking to maybe more technical individuals dealing with AI and data and algorithms. Do you feel like that's a fair percentage? Do you think it's high? Do you think it's low in terms of technical knowledge?
Yeah, so I think I could definitely be a little bit biased with it just because with technology, I'm really working with individuals who are technically savvy with everything that they're working with. So I think I could be a little bit biased, but in the grand scheme of things, if I look outside of the people I work with, I think it seems a little bit high because everyone outside of the technology field doesn't seem to know too much in terms of what's going on in the world, what's going on with technology. Another thing that I find really helpful is LinkedIn. LinkedIn's a really good area to kind of keep you up to date with everything. So I think that that's a little bit of a high number, but again, I think it depends on the people who you're surveying.
Okay. And no, I'm right there with you. I think that's such a great point too. When you bring up, hey, look, let's put it out there. The people that you're dealing with are in the tech field, right? So when I was having brunch the other day with a handful of folks who aren't in the technology field, and they were asking me, hey, what is ChatGPT? Right. And meanwhile, it's been here, right, and involved with the folks that you're working with. So do you think that that could be a goal as you're evolving your digital mindset? So basically, as a person grows and gets this, I guess, foundation of more of the soft skill basis, is the tech maybe a cherry on top, a bonus, an addition that someone can evolve into to continuously improve?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that that could be the case. Yeah, I think that that's something that is a really good bonus.
Okay, no, that makes sense, right? Because then they're going to be able to, once you kind of get to a certain level, you always want to continuously learn. And with new technologies, kind of having that grasp of what's coming out and how it can impact things, certainly sounds like it plays a key role. So, when you were talking about digital mindset for individuals, let's kind of go back to this. Where do you see are the most important elements? We talked about technology and saying, hey, look, let's, if you know it already, even better. If you don't know it, let's focus on a certain key areas, and then we'll get to the truly digital piece. So where do you start off coaching with a new individual?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest aspects and one of the most important elements of digital mindset that I find is adaptability. And that is really the kind of the gateway of everything else and expanding your mind. Because if you aren't able to adapt to the concept of having a digital mindset, the rest really doesn't follow. So I think adaptability is where I start coaching individuals, of letting them know, hey, you may have one thought process, but there are going to be a million other thought processes out there, or improvements or quicker ways that you can come to this example. Especially with AI these days. I mean, however you're doing something in your daily process, at least in the next probably 2 to 3 months at this point, just because AI is evolving so quickly, there will probably be a more efficient way to do that. So are you still doing things that you were doing 3 months ago the same now? Or have you thought, how can I improve this? How can I be more efficient in my role? So I think adaptability is the biggest thing that I always start to coach with, because that will help them open their mindset to adapt to those other core digital mindset traits.
Great. And that makes sense to what you said before about, an important aspect of technology within digital mindset is to make sure you're up to date. You realize what's going on out there in the world, parlaying that with their adaptability skill set, they can see how they can infuse it or potentially grow with anything that throws their way, maybe not even just technology. So when you're dealing with, let's say, let's maybe do it in different categories here. If you're dealing with junior individuals, what is the top trait that you find yourself coaching them on? Is it adaptability, or is it another aspect of digital mindset?
Yeah, so I think with junior individuals specifically, I really find the top area I am training and coaching in is just about taking initiative and having that outcome oriented mindset, because I think that that is something that I've seen lacking a lot recently. I mean, even if you look at the news, you hear a lot about quiet quitting and doing the bare minimum. But where's that really getting you in a year from now if you are quiet quitting? What are you doing to help your future self in 5 years from now if that's the mindset that you have? So I think really being or having an outcome-oriented mindset is something that I have seen lacking in more junior individuals. And I think that that's really what I've seen the difference in terms of the leaders and those that get left behind is the lack of initiative. If you don't have that initiative, you're never going to grow because managers are not looking for you to do the bare minimum. They're looking at someone who can do the bare minimum, but also add value to a team. So I think that that is probably the biggest area I start off coaching junior developers with is that initiative.
Isn't that interesting? You think when somebody's new to the market or to the industry and, you're all excited, you want to give your full efforts and maybe later you get drained, as an example or burned out. But it seems like you're running into that at the start of their careers, which is really interesting. And this isn't the podcast for that, but social media's influence might play a factor in that. But I think that's for another day. And as you kind of progress up the experience level, mid-tier, do you run into maybe somebody, let's say 5 to say 7 years of experience when you're coaching them? Is it still on the outcome-oriented, solution-oriented piece initiative, or do they move to something else that you find?
Yeah, so I've actually seen it shifts and it can just be, a generational gap or something like that. But I do actually see that it shifts a little bit to once sometimes individuals get comfortable in their role, they know, okay, cool, I have to adapt. I see a little bit of imposter syndrome actually sinking in at that level. And it's something where I think once people sometimes get comfortable in their position, then they can think, okay, well, am I doing as good as I think I am? Maybe I'm not improving as much as I see other peers improving. So how can I make sure that I am actually still giving that 110% once I fully have the grasp of everything, because everything's not brand new to them anymore. So they're not constantly learning. So that's where I bring in having that exploratory mindset of keep it going. What are you learning? What are you doing today that is going to make you a better employee in a year from now? Something I always like to bring in is monthly goals. So I really do train this a lot with more of those mid-level individuals. So they do have those things to still strive for. It's not learning your role from scratch, but it's learning how to be better at the role. And with these monthly goals, it's cool because I always say, okay, well, at the end of the year, in 12 months from now, you're going to learn 12 brand new topics. And you can look back and say, wow, I know 12 things that I didn't a year ago. So I always love that piece of it.
That's awesome. Do you think so? When I'm thinking 5 to 7 years, they're probably moving into somewhat of a management role, a lead role. Do you think that's playing
Right.
a part in the imposter syndrome too? Like, hey, look, sure, I may have been a high performer, but now I have others who are following me, and that's a lot of pressure. You think that plays a piece?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Because being a high performer and a leader are two completely different things. Just because someone is good at their job does not mean that they can lead others efficiently or even just teach and train others. And that's a big misconception. I think that that's something where you see people sometimes getting promoted for the wrong reasons. And that reason is just because, hey, this person knows their job and they've been here long enough. Let's put them in charge of people. So I think that that does start to sink in because unless you're really trained to be a leader and to be a manager, it can be a very big adjustment period for them.
Cool. Excellent. And so let's go to the next tier, the last tier that we'll talk about here is, let's say, directors, AVPs, VPs, whatever it may be. Do you find maybe innovation and experimenting as an area that you're coaching on with them most, or other areas?
Yeah, I really think it's something that sometimes when you do get to that level, it can be a little bit harder to think outside of the box because once you get to that area, it's a lot of time management and it's a lot of managing tasks. And sometimes the creativity takes a back seat at that point. So I do think that that's something I've noticed as well with more of those senior individuals is you have individuals coming into the job market who maybe have a lot of creative ideas, but don't really have that much to back it up with. And then over time, you realize, okay, I just have to do my job. I just have to do my job. And then sometimes people get stuck there and forget about, okay, well, how do I even expand? How do I grow? I think leading by example is so important because if you're a senior manager or individual and you're not constantly learning, how can you expect your junior individuals to have that mindset?
Perfect. Yeah, and I know you and I had this discussion before. Obviously, with my role is even just you kind of get caught in the machine of the day to day of what you're supposed to do, right? Doing this project here, jump into that project, handling this growth area or whatever it may be, and you almost forget about that constant improvement and creating those experiments. I think is a really popular area that you'll see at that level and being innovative. How do you redefine yourself? And I think at that level, you were sharing with me is sometimes people just get stagnant, and to continuously have that adaptability of digital mindset and provide that value not only to the company that you're working with and your team, but you as an individual, you have to continuously innovate and experiment. So, really interesting. It's interesting how you go from, having somebody uh, you know, become outcome oriented to handling imposter syndrome to handling innovation. You almost feel like the three of them should be switched around. So
Right.
that's so interesting how you do that. So let me take a quick step back because a lot of people may not know what is a digital mindset coach, a DNA coach, right? Whatever it may be. What does your day to day consist of?
Yeah, so I really think that my job is pretty interesting because, like you said, a lot of people have never heard of it before. So, what being a digital mindset coach is really making sure that you are not a bare minimum employee and really making sure that every employee that I coach is actually, I mean, taking initiative. I hate to go back to it again and repeat that, but really just taking initiative, I think, is the big thing that is lacking. And taking initiative can mean so many different things depending on your role. So, maybe taking initiative is reaching out to your teammates a little bit more and collaborating with each other. Or maybe taking initiative is bringing new ideas to the table or a mixture of both. It can be so many different areas. And I think that that is something that I really focus on a lot is to find the gaps of where are you lacking in your role? And if you are giving 100% in one area, how can I make sure you give 100% in all areas? So I think that that is a big aspect of the role. The second area of coaching is just making sure you are staying up to date with everything that's happening in the digital world. So, do you know those latest technologies? Do you know the automation tools that will help your job as best as possible? Are you thinking what's next, just like everyone else is? Because if you're not thinking what's next, your peer is thinking what's next. And that's how you can get left behind. So, really just making sure people have that mindset of constant growth is what I really focus on. And again, it looks different for everyone because people are lacking in different areas and people are stronger in different areas.
Interesting. And I'm sure there's other strategies that are incorporated in there. Do you have so initiative? I have a question actually first, and I was thinking about it while you're discussing it. Why is it the number one thing? Like I feel like as we're going through our examples here, initiative, you can see the passion to help build that. Any ideas on why you think initiative is probably top of your mind right now?
Yeah, I think with working with so many junior individuals going into the field, I have seen a massive mindset shift from before COVID and after COVID.
Hmm.
And I think during COVID, a lot of individuals got very used to not interacting as much with people, or even when people were graduating, college on Zoom is very different. There were not deadlines to submit things. Everything was a lot more lenient. There was not much guidance or direction. Even if you look at high schools, I mean, with everyone working remote, teachers can't keep track of, 30 individuals per class virtually. It's very hard to do. So I think that there has been a big mindset shift since COVID, since there weren't so many guidelines in terms of structuring with whether it's school, whether it's kind of that shift from working in person to working at home, no one was prepared for it. So as managers were learning how to manage that situation, employees could kind of see that. And it wasn't always the, I guess, most efficient shift. So I think that that kind of had people go a little stagnant at that point.
Interesting. I mean, uh, it seems so. It seems so. So, a couple follow-up questions here, because it's so interesting. Is do you feel because that there was more of this isolation that obviously 2020 brought about, and even 2021 to some extent, beginning of 2022, do you feel like being part of a community, aka school system, right? Having those people you can quickly interact with, does that help create or evolve or maybe even accelerate your DNA in terms of digital mindset? Do you feel like that's playing a factor?
Oh
Feel
yeah,
free to okay,
definitely.
excellent. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I definitely think that with teamwork and with collaboration, why it's always such a big push for a lot of companies is you are learning someone's completely different mindset on a topic. That may be because I was taught a certain way or I was raised a certain way. And if you were raised a completely different way, you may have a different mindset on something. So I think when you are in person, whether that be at school or even at work, you're learning so many different viewpoints and you're a little bit more open and a little bit more adaptive because if someone is in person sharing a story with you that maybe you're unfamiliar with, you have to adapt in that moment. But when there's a screen in front of you, it's a way different type of interaction. You don't have to try to adapt in that moment. You can wait a little bit and type something out later. So I do think the lack of the social aspect of things that 2020 brought does actually play a huge factor because everyone can just kind of think with a one-track mind instead of having to see other people's viewpoints. Because again, when you're not communicating in person, you have a boundary between you guys.
And then even in the school system, right? Typically it's 30, 40, whatever amount of people on webcam. They're not really interacting. They're listening things here and there, as opposed to maybe even just a normal Zoom that we're seeing in our work environment with two, three people on there. And you're totally spot on. I know you know Charles Dunn, the data manager for the Jump program. Getting to work in an office with him and hearing all these different ideas, I mean, that just spurs thoughts that otherwise wouldn't have been there, right? In terms of, hey, this new technology, this new way to do it. So really interesting. And not to go into too many of your secrets here, but I think you typically coach that way, right? You start them up in pockets of individuals so they're sharing their success stories, and then you move them more into micro settings in terms of um customized one-on-one settings and making improvements with minimal variable changes as the main objective. Is that correct?
Right. Yeah. At first, especially when they first start into a new role, it's a lot of the focus being on what are the expectations in the very beginning. Because although they just went through maybe a lot of training or a lot of schooling, and here's the technologies that you need to know, they don't know what managers are thinking. Corporate environment is a brand new world, pretty much, to these entry level employees that are entering the job market. So, I think that that's a really big thing is just keeping those expectations high in the beginning and bringing awareness to what those expectations are. Something that I do like doing in these group settings, which again, they're still pretty small in the beginning because I do want them to all share and feel comfortable with kind of bringing their ideas to the table and having the time to with a small group is having them share what have you done to take initiative in the beginning. And what this does is if you have taken initiative, cool, you're going to get the spotlight. But if you haven't, you're also going to get a spotlight just in a little different way. You're going to see, okay, wow, this person's doing this person's doing that. I really actually haven't taken any initiative. And that is such a good practice to bring that to light because without this mini group, you're not comparing yourself to others, which in this case, it is actually a really good thing to do because you may just not be aware even that you're not taking initiative. But then when you're looking at what others are doing, you can think back and say, wow, I really need to step it up.
Cool. I mean, it brings it to light, right? A lot of times within these groups, you're seeing things you don't know, right? And then you can go cater to it. So let's go into kind of where this is moving us along here. Sometimes there's resistance, I'm sure, right? When you're helping with individuals or teams. So from your perspective and where you've seen success, how do you help individuals and teams overcome that resistance to change, especially when it comes to growing these new traits?
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the biggest areas that I focus on in the beginning is what are you currently doing? Do you feel like you're doing enough? And it's interesting because sometimes people won't see that there's an issue. However, they do feel that they aren't doing enough. And it's interesting because you then think, okay, well, how do you not think that that's an issue, but you're not doing enough? If you're rating yourself a 6 out of 10, but you really haven't made any effort to improve, what's the disconnect there? So then what I like to bring to light and bring to attention is think of someone that you're currently working with that you really admire. Maybe it's your team lead. Maybe it's someone who started at the same time as you, but has been given more responsibility because they are doing a lot better. Who is someone you would like to emulate? And then once they have that person in mind, I have them go interview that person and ask them how they got to that point. And that is always such a eye-opening experience for them because once they hear this person didn't just do the bare minimum, they find out that this person after hours is studying, that they're constantly checking in with their manager to make sure that they're meeting expectations just so they can then go and exceed them. It really changes their perspective and they see, wow, this person I want to be, I'm not doing anything that they're doing, which means I have to change that mindset.
That's phenomenal. So going to interview somebody who they want to, who they look up to, so to speak, and going into that resistance, I think you think it's really important to realize is that when you start working, you don't have that time to learn and improve yourself always. Yes, you're getting the experience. Maybe you're on a team that, specializes in learning and blocks off specific time, but you have to put your own time into this to improve yourself, right? It's kind of, I know I do a lot of sports references, but I like to play basketball. Sure, I played, games and there's practices or so, but guess what? On free time, I'm practicing free throws and three pointers and dribbling, right? On my own free time. So that way I'm even better at that stage. Sierra, why are people not doing that now? Does it go back to that initiative that you're talking about before? Or is it frankly, people think they can learn only on the job, especially again, keeping in mind digital mindset, which is really taking people to the next level and in the future, mandatory, as you mentioned.
Right. I do think it is a little bit of initiative, but I think it's really mainly that second part that you mentioned of individuals feel that everything can be done in the 40 hours, that they're only getting paid for the 40 hours. So that's all that they need to do. Yes, that's all that you need to do your job, but that's not all you have to do to learn. Even if you think of school, you don't study for tests during school hours. You do that after hours. You're studying after hours. It's the same exact thing. The same exact thing applies in the corporate environment. And that's why I really like what I shared with you of having them go and interview a top
Mhm.
performer so they can see for themselves because you can give someone all the advice in the world, but once it's actually in their face of this is actually what has been done to create this outcome, that is usually what hits home and what changes their mind and says, okay, well, if I want to get there, I have to study after hours. So I do think it is just sometimes a lack of awareness of how much work it actually takes to get to that next level. I also always use an example of an Olympian. If you want to go to the Olympics, you're not just going to your mandatory practices and then doing nothing in your free time. If you want to get to that Olympic level, those Olympians are practicing 24/7, literally, sometimes, because even they're watching what they eat, they're sleeping for a certain amount of time. Everything that they're doing is going towards an end goal. So maybe if you listen to podcasts all the time outside of work, what podcasts are you listening that are going to better yourself? It's really becoming a lifestyle. If you want to improve and if you want to be the best of the best, it has to become your lifestyle. And again, if you want to just give the bare minimum, that's fine, but just realize that other individuals that you're working against are going to exceed you, and it may be very unclear where that leaves you.
I'm going to ask you a tough question, and I'll kind of tee it up a little bit here. Okay. So now this isn't for anybody listening to this, right? Because everybody who's listening to this is ideally looking to learn or improve or confirm that they're on the right track. But I'm
Right.
sure when you're going through coaching that there are people that just don't care. right? They're there to do the minimums and that's it. And I do want to talk, I really love the way you used it. Digital mindset is truly a lifestyle because it's not just a professional skill or trait, right? Especially now. I mean, everything we do involves that type of mentality. But how about those who are just in the term of resistance? What if they just say, hey, look, Sierra, I really appreciate everything, but I'm cool doing my 9 to 5, going home and realistically, spending time with TV, whatever it may be, doing these other things. How do you handle that? Because that's not necessarily wrong, right? But how do you handle that in a coaching situation?
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's always a tricky situation because as a coach, I always want to help everyone to be their best selves. But if someone doesn't have that ambition, it can be a little bit challenging. I really, in those situations, really just like to be very transparent with them and let them know that if you don't want to be the best, someone else does. So this just may not be a career for you at that point. It can be something that you are going to get left behind regardless. If you're not putting in that effort, it may be something that what your actions are doing aren't aligning with what you're saying your goals are. So it's just really about putting everything into perspective for them of saying, okay, well, do you want to stay in this field? Because if you do, it's a requirement for you to upskill yourself, for you to grow your skills, to go past the 9 to 5. And if you don't, here's where you're going to be left. So I think it's just always really bringing that awareness to them. And then if they really do want to still excel in, for example, the technology field, they know, okay, well, if other people are doing it, I have to. What I always or sometimes what I find in that situation is that once people start taking themselves to the next level, it can sometimes get a little bit addicting where they're like, okay, I learned this. That's awesome. Let me learn more. And that bridges themselves to another area and another one and another one. So that's always the best case scenario is when you bring that to attention. They're a little bit maybe forced into, hey, I know I have to learn, so I'm going to put the effort in. And then they get attached to it. And then they just get hooked into constantly wanting to learn. So it can really go one of two ways. I think it just goes back to how ambitious is the person.
I can see that. Yeah, yeah. It learning, improving yourself. It's like working out, right? Or whatever it may be. You kind of get addicted to the results in a good way. And then so staying on that a little bit, I think it's important to point out there are different categories on the individuals who come to your coaching, right? Or coaching in general. You have those that you just kind of you mentioned, those that say, hey, look, I'm fine my 9 to 5. I'm okay. You know where I am. This is just what I want to do. You have those who want to do improvements, but maybe a little bit less ambition. And so you kind of work with them and with different techniques that may not be as accelerated as those who you talk about seeing improvements and creating a digital mindset as a lifestyle. And then you probably can classify them into buckets, right? The last group is has a digital mindset, right? That continuous learning, the agility, right? The passion for growth and being in the know. You have the middle tier that's going to get there at their own pace. And then you have the others that say, hey, look, I'm good where I am right now. And so as a coach, what you do is you kind of highlight that with them and give them the customized plan, it sounds like, right? Excellent. And then when you're dealing with resistance, obviously if you're going to a coach, more than likely it's because they have a need or a want to do something, be it either they need help to improve at the basics of their job or they want to take things to the next level. So how are you measuring the success of your coaching engagements in terms of digital mindset being created or enhanced for that individual?
Yeah. And like you mentioned, it is really different for every single person because when you have those individuals who do have that digital mindset, it can be something where I say, hey, go get the certification in the next 2 months. They'll do it. I don't have to create a plan for them. But other people who maybe need a little bit more help, It's more so of, as you mentioned earlier, those minimal variable improvements of, okay, well, what are you going to do this week to get to that 2 month goal? What are you going to do next week? Even if we need to go more micro sense, we could do every single day. What are you going to do today? What are you going to do tomorrow? What are you going to study the next day? Who are you going to meet up with who has taken this certification? So it is very custom per person. So I will track their improvements. I will see, what do you know this week that you didn't know last week? I'll ask them certain kind of simulation based questions and scenario based questions of, if you were in this situation, what would you do? I will gauge their response from the first week that I'm meeting with them to the first month. And with that, it is very telling of, if you're thinking you would do the same thing in the situation as you would a month ago, you're not growing. So then it has to be an even more micro approach of, okay, let's take it even more basic here. So I do track them in that way. I also have them track themselves and their growth. And I ask them, what do you know today that you didn't know last week? I'm so big on goals, because the biggest and clearest way you can know if you're growing is by, have you achieved goals? And if you haven't, that's usually a big wake up call. If I ask you, what do you know this Friday that you didn't know last Friday? And you can't think of anything, it's going to put a lot of things into perspective of, oh, wow, I'm actually not really growing as a person. And that can be a very scary thought and can kick you into gear of, I need to go learn something. So I do track them in a few different ways. I also do love checking in with managers to see what improvements they have noticed in those individuals as well. So a few different things. I really like taking my observations into consideration, the individuals' observations, and then also their surrounding team. What have they noticed in them? Have they noticed growth, if any? And where can they maybe continue to grow? I like to take in a lot of different perspectives.
You covered a lot there. So the part that jumped out at me is when somebody's learning as well. A couple things jumped out just to clarify. But when someone's learning or trying to, and then you say, "Hey, what did you learn last week?" and they look at you and say, "Hey, look, I didn't really learn anything." Does that normally go one of two directions? Does it avalanche to, okay, 2 weeks passed, a month passed, 3 months passed, I haven't improved myself, and it just keeps going? And then, or more frequently, do you see, wait a second, I didn't do anything the past week or two. I gotta put this into another gear. Do you see a direction that it normally goes in?
Yeah, I think it does depend on the coach themselves. And I'm a pretty tough love type of coach, where if you say that you haven't improved in the past week or you haven't learned anything, I'm going to follow up with, well, why not? And really put the spotlight on you. And that is something where you can't just say, well, I don't know, because I'm going to say, well, no, give me an answer. Why not? Well, what have you done? What have you done after work every day? What did you do this weekend? Okay, well, if you did that on Saturday, what did you do on Sunday? I will really dive in, because in order for you to be your best self, I want to help you to get you there. And I'm not just going to push it off. So I think I see it leaning toward the latter direction of what you mentioned, because they know that next coaching meeting, I'm going to ask what they've done, and they know that they can't come with nothing. If I say, create an action plan for how you're going to get this certification in the next 2 months, and you just say, yeah, I'm going to study and go on the website, I'm going to say, okay, well, tell me more. Go more specific. The next time, they know they'll have to give me a very detailed action plan of what resources are they going to look up? When are you going to take your first practice exam? What are you going to do to make sure that you ace that first practice exam? I put in so much detail to their goals and their plans that I really don't leave them with an option to give me that I don't know more than once.
That's excellent. So you're holding them accountable. I mean, really is what it is, hey, look, this is what we talked about. I'm sure you come to some type of agreement that, hey, this is the value add that this will do. So,
Right.
yeah, and I was going to ask you about, how can leaders encourage and facilitate a culture of continuous learning and, basically adapting to support a digital mindset? And
Yeah.
I think you covered it a lot, though, to be honest with you. So holding them accountable, and also realizing everybody's different, right? So we talked about the different categories of individuals and drives of passion and ambition. So I didn't want to cut you off there, but is that kind of your recommendation to leaders is, hey, look, realize everybody's different, but hold them accountable? What do you think?
Definitely. I think that that is actually the biggest lesson I learned as a coach. In the beginning, when I coached my very first person, I saw that something worked very well with this person. And I was like, great, this is the way to do it. This will work for everyone. And then when I saw the next person, it was received completely different. Then I thought, okay, this is going to be a very different approach. Now, this was years ago, of course. That was probably my very first lesson that I learned, but it really is, everyone has a different mentality, everyone has a different mindset and background that they came from. So everyone is going to think differently. I mean, even if you think of yourself and you think of maybe a close friend or family member, I'm sure right off the bat you can think of 10 differences between someone and someone else that you're close with. So it is something where I do feel leaders should really get to know the person, really get to know the individual's values and help them with knowing their values, lead them toward how they can be better. Also just leading by example. That's another big thing I focus on is managers cannot, well, I believe that managers cannot manage efficiently if they are not spearheading what they are teaching, kind of the practice what you preach in that area. Because if you're not learning, if your employees are not seeing that you're a better person and you've learned more in the past year, how can you expect them to do that? So that's another big thing, I think. Learn the person and lead by example. I think that those two qualities really create a great leader.
You took the words right out of my mouth with that one. Is when you're explaining all this, I was kind of thinking about our discussion here already when you're talking about digital mindset includes adaptability and agility and continuous learning, and it's a set of approaches of dealing with the world, right? For the manager to be a leader, and manager I'm referring to any level where others are reporting to you or teams underneath you, you actually have to have that digital mindset to somewhat infuse it in others,
Right.
right? But I this does move to the next thing is everybody's aware of digital transformation, and I'm sure everybody's also aware that most companies' digital transformations fail. And by now we've seen that research says it's because of the individuals, their buying or the way it's being relayed to them. So with what kind of we were talking about here, do you feel that corporation or organizational digital transformation, does the individual's digital mindset, so at the ground level, at the mid-level manager, do you think it starts there, making sure they have a digital mindset, so kind of bottom up, or do you think it's a drive from the top down? What are your thoughts on digital mindset playing a part into the success of digital transformation for organizations?
Right. I think it can depend on the specific company's organization and how the company runs. But more times than not, I really do think it starts off with the organization kind of waving that flag of we are looking to be a digital transformation company. We want to work with those next gen technologies. We want people who are adaptive. It can be a little demoralizing if you see that those leaders actually aren't living that at all, because then it's like, okay, well, why am I doing that if the people above me aren't living that or really meeting those expectations? So I do think more times than not, it does start with the organization. Now, I think that the people can be a big influence, because if there is a leader who isn't doing something, but then they're getting these ideas constantly brought to them by their employees, that manager can maybe kind of wake up and think, oh, wow, these employees are doing a lot. They're on it. Let me start trying to change my thought process. So I really do think it depends on the situation, but ideally, if the overall organization is really putting their focus and efforts in being digital and transforming their company, as long as the efforts are being made in the right areas, I mean, I think that that's really motivating for employees to make that change, because everyone wants to be a part of a bigger goal. And I
Mhm.
think that that can really help there.
Okay, so the ripeness of the organization's openness to, I should say, with transparency, experiments, and kind of open door policies to saying, hey, look, how can we do better? We want to move, we want to create this digital culture. Maybe the maturity towards digital is where we want to go.
Right.
And so kind of saying, hey, look, doors open. I want to hear your thoughts. I want to get into it. Share ideas is the first step with potentially then getting that buy-in of the individuals at that ground level, driving it to completion. Is that kind of where you're at?
Yeah, definitely. I think that that's at least what I've seen. I think that that's the case.
Okay, no, that's phenomenal. And Sierra, this is probably my favorite topic, and I could be here all day talking about digital mindset with you. But I do only have a few more questions, and it's kind of the future, right? You almost with digital mindset, you talked about it being mandatory, and as a trait for success in the future, maybe even just day to day, right? With the way things are progressing. Looking ahead, how do you see digital mindset evolving? Like, what do you think it will impact? Let's start there. What do you think?
Yeah. Well, with digital mindset evolving, I think that there are a lot of factors that come into play here. I think the biggest thing, which is on everyone's mind, well, on a lot of people's minds at least, is AI. AI is moving at a quicker pace that anyone thought it would. I mean, you have people trying to actually stop it at this point. And with that being said, I think with having a digital mindset, it is still going to be about adapting and being agile and having a continuous growth mindset, but faster. You're going to have to adapt faster. You're going to have agility at a quicker pace. You're going to have to grow at a quicker pace to keep up with AI. Now, are we going to be able to keep up with AI? I think that's the big question at the moment here. But if you want to have a chance to, it is going to be about really speeding up your mindset of constant growth. I think that that is going to be a big thing is how can you do these things faster? How can you learn faster? And with there being so many tools that can just really spit out an answer for you instantly, it is possible. But it's about how are you going to manage your time effectively to be able to adapt and grow again at a very quick pace because we have to be quicker than technology at this point, which seems almost impossible, but I think that that's the big thing to try.
Okay, and that makes sense. I mean, when you're looking at the evolution of this, and forgive me, there's a survey that was mentioned in the technology fallacy. They mentioned that the number one thing to look for is vision and purpose. Vision and purpose, right? So that would consistently be there to align with everything that you just shared. And taking it to the next step, then Gen AI is here, right? Gen AI, you've seen the report this week about one of the financial institutions releasing people that's saying that because AI is going to take over those roles, right? And technology is a part of it. We discussed how you have to be aware of how that's going to be impacting your role. How will someone's evolution within digital mindset, how will that evolution influence those around them grow a digital mindset? Because I think it's important to realize that, yes, our major discussion here is, hey, the individual's growth in that area, but they're also impacting those around them and can bring them with them. What are your thoughts about that as we evolve in the workforce?
Yeah, no, I definitely think that when you have a digital mindset, it can really spark that in others. If others see that you're constantly learning and they're not, I think that that sometimes does bring that awareness. I think that people will just start to realize that, again, kind of bringing it back to our very first point, is that you will have to have a digital mindset. It's going to be mandatory, and I really can't stress it enough because if you don't, everyone else is going to start to catch on. The kind of like your competition is going to have that mindset if you don't. So, something that I really recommend in this case to make sure that you are constantly evolving your digital mindset is stay up to date with everything that's happening. Go on LinkedIn, subscribe to technology newsletters, read digital mindset and digital transformation books or articles. Really staying up to date is going to be the difference maker, I feel. If people who, I mean, as you mentioned earlier at that brunch that you were at, people didn't even know what Chat GPT is, and companies are over here using it to eliminate jobs.
Mm-hmm.
So you really want to see what side you're on. Are you on the side that is just finding out what, and I know we keep going back to chat GPT, but it's such a hot topic, right? You really have to see, are you someone that doesn't know what it is at all? Or are you someone that is trying to utilize it to the best of your capabilities because everyone else is? So you should also be trying to, use it as best as you can as well.
And share your learnings, right? Share your learnings with your team and those around you. Let people poke and prod and give their inputs too, and that will help you grow even faster, right? So my last question for you, Sierra, is let's talk about the role of a digital mindset coach. How are you, as a coach, adapting over time? Because guess what? You're coaching people on digital mindset, on digital transformation, on corporate readiness, et cetera, right? How do you you have to stay ahead of the curve? How are you doing it?
Right. Yeah, I think a big thing here is constantly learning the people that I am coaching because as we mentioned, I've seen such a difference in, 4 years ago coaching people and now, and always finding out what is lacking in the understanding of what it takes to succeed. So what I think that I have really done to kind of stay up to date in this digital mindset coaching role is listening to those podcasts on what's happening in AI, what's happening in just the technology industry in general, what's also happening in the job market in general as well. We've seen such a big shift of it being an employee job market to an employer job market at this point. And those things really do take a big turn as well of how you're approaching your role and how you're approaching your career. So I think something that I have really done to adapt is try to be one step ahead. If all companies don't know a certain technology yet, how can I learn a little bit more about that so I can be prepared to teach people that this is the expectation before it becomes an issue, before it becomes a lacking area? I think that that's something that I've been really trying to focus on. And again, everything's evolved so quick. So it's all about just how quick can you stay up to date with it?
Fantastic, fantastic, and that's a great way to wrap it up here. I mean, just right now, it's an advantage and I guess a bonus to have digital mindset, but it is quickly becoming a need, right, in every aspect. And Sierra, I really appreciate your time. Obviously, you know this like the back of your hand, and this has been a really fun almost hour, I believe. With that being said, I wanted to thank you, Sierra, for your time as we talked about digital mindset. And I'd like to thank everybody listening. This was Corporate Bytes, and I'm Rich Bowers. Bye bye.